I am Jeff Foxworthy, and welcome to Gamekeeper Podcast. If you want to learn more about farming for wildlife and habitat management, then, buddy, you are in the right place. Join the Gamekeeper crew direct from Mossy Oak Land Enhancement Studio as they discuss the latest wildlife and habitat management practices, news, and, of course, hunting. There's no telling what you'll learn, but I'm going to tell you, I bet it's interesting. Enjoy.
We're live in 3, 2, 1.
Well, we are here once again, West Point, Mississippi.
Yeah, some of us look a little weary.
I'm a little tired.
Weary warrior over there.
Yeah, well, it's winding down, and my cruel spring continues.
Well, shout out to the people that are hanging with it.
That could be the title of your next book, Bobby. My Cruel Spring.
That is pretty good.
Yeah.
Not like the endless summer, the cruel spring.
This turkey is just...
He's been messing with him since the opening day.
Yes, he's devoted his whole spring to the same turkey.
Which he's prone to do. He's prone to do.
So I named this turkey about 3 or 4 years ago that he and I fooled with down there. That kicked my butt too. I called him Joe Cool, and Bobby liked that name, and he'd always say, "Yeah, the Joe Cool. Joe Cool's still alive." Anyway, it's the same area, probably, and who knows? But he's
definitely kin.
He calls him Joe Cruel.
You know,
that's
Bobby,
good. That's
if
good.
you don't get a Mississippi or get an Alabama bird this year, I think you should deserve an asterisk by your name.
Yeah,
because you had an opportunity to take a legal but non-ethical shot at that bird while he was still on the limb.
You ain't got to tell everything,
Dudley.
I don't want to ask.
He didn't say that if that opportunity shows itself again, that he's not above it before the season.
That was early in the game.
Yeah, it was. That's too early in the game. So. Let's look. It's
Joe Cool remains cool.
Joe Cruel.
Joe Cruel. My bad.
Well,
my bad.
The only thing I can figure is that he is just waiting to see a hen before he flies down. He's not trusting what he hears.
What time was the video you sent me this morning?
It's probably 7:30ish.
Because he turns his camp. Yeah. First of all, it was great to hear because
it was great to hear.
Since you killed that turkey with me, Laney, I have not heard. It's like 2 weeks almost. I have not heard a single business gobble since then. Right. Not many gobbles, but they're just half-hearted jet gobble. You know, this thing Bobby's hunting, he was like, "Gah!"
Yeah, he was.
And Bobby sent me a video. It was 10 seconds, and he gobbles like breathing fire on him.
I thought he was pretty close.
Bobby, Bobby yeps, and he just hammers right back at you. I said, "What are you doing coming back to work? You should still be down there."
Yeah.
You need to pack a lunch next time you go try him. You just stay there.
Yeah.
Probably so.
Well, we had this going on today. I appreciate you coming back.
Well, yeah, we got work to do. We got things to do. So, wow. Well, they're so much fun, but they can be so aggravating, as everybody knows.
That's what makes it so much fun.
Are you making notes each hunt so we can do an entire podcast about Bobby's saga with Joe Cruel?
No, we
just need a named turkey podcast. Period. But.
Yeah, everybody come in. I've got a couple from way past, not lately.
Yeah, I know we've got one, or 2, or 4.
Yeah, these named turkeys are bad turkeys.
Yeah, they're bad.
They don't get a name unless they're bad.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
but we're kind of shifting gears today.
And I love to hear, and I can't wait to talk to our guest about what the world looked like a couple of 200 or 300 years ago, when these elk were native to Tennessee and Kentucky and that part of the world. And were they here?
Yeah, I mean, we've always heard they ran around the prairie here. I don't even know. That's one of the questions I was going to ask him.
I'm going to wait till we get to talking. I do have a couple questions and a story about some that were here actually around this area.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Right. So let's get our guest introduced. We don't want him to fall asleep up there. So, look, through the magic of Zoom from somewhere in Tennessee, we've got
undisclosed location,
Mr. Garrett Clevinger, who is the elk program coordinator for the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency.
TWRA.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank you, guys. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
You know, Garrett, you kind of got that look of like a outdoor trapper, a real tough guy. You kind of fit the part very well.
I mean, I do love being outside. It's much better than being in an office all day. I can tell you that.
Yeah, we live that.
Garrett, tell us a little bit about yourself. You sound like you're very well educated in wildlife.
Yeah. So, like a lot of folks, I guess, that get involved in wildlife, I, grew up hunting and fishing and really just enjoyed every aspect of, and and being outside. So I kind of knew right off that was really what I wanted to try to do with my career. I didn't get really started deer hunting until I was later on in life, probably about the time I was 18 or 19. Once I got out in the woods and experienced that, I knew I really wanted to try to get more involved with research, and landed a graduate assistantship at Ball State University and started looking at some different aspects of urban rural deer populations and how they were interacting with each other. And then after that, I just couldn't handle it. I needed to keep going and learning more. So I ended up going to Virginia Tech and working on a project out there, looking at spatial ecology of some deer that were out in the mountains out there. So I've really just enjoyed kind of getting out there and looking at answering some different questions with large mammals, and that's kind of what kind of kept me in this and how I got started, just kind of going from hunting and being outside and wanting to know more about the animals that I was chasing. So,
well, I'm amazed at all these different schools that you attended. You've got a master's degree, you've got your PhD. If you were going to give advice to a young person that was thinking about going to college and studying wildlife, we actually have had a lot of people that have said, hey, our young son or daughter listened to y'all's podcast and got interested in going to Mississippi State or got interested in doing this. We've had several of those.
All right.
But would you recommend the masters, and how far through do you think young people need to go?
I think definitely more and more people are definitely popping up with masters a whole lot more than what they did probably 20 or 30 years ago, for sure, in this profession. I definitely don't think that you need to go do a PhD to kind of get your foot in the door, especially with a state wildlife agency. I think one of the biggest things I think folks can do, really, outside of trying to go and get more education, is just trying to volunteer. Especially for those folks that have a bachelor's degree and kind of maybe would want to move around and try to do a few different technician jobs on a few research projects. You really gain a whole lot of experience that way that can take you a long way. So I highly recommend anybody that's wanting to get involved in this field is just get out of the classroom and go learn, be involved in a lot of the research projects that are ongoing. If you're lucky enough to get on with a species that you're wanting to work with, that kind of can get your foot in the door, especially if you're wanting to try to get into a master's program. But I think just learning through that route is invaluable if you're trying to, get into this type of field.
Well, it sounds to me like you've got one of the bigger challenges that a guy in wildlife could have, is trying to manage reintroducing a population, a species into an area that may have its challenges. Maybe there's probably people that don't want them around for crop damage and whatnot. You've kind of got an uphill battle in places, I would think.
Oh yeah, definitely, absolutely. It's never a cut and dry situation, right? You've always got unfortunately, there's two sides of every story, and so that is something that we work with the elk there in Tennessee is, you've got a lot of people that really enjoy them, and other folks, they're just, trying to take care of their fields or, keep that depredation level down. And so we do have to deal with kind of both sides of the coin with things.
Yeah. Well, before we get started, we're going to get turn Dudley loose with rapid fire, but
yeah,
kind of, we all know the shape of Tennessee is long. Y'all got to have a long state. Where are we talking about these elk? If you were just going to kind of put a little bubble, pin a note on the state.
Yeah, so East Tennessee is where we're looking at right here. We get a lot of folks that really think that the elk population we're talking about is in the Smokies. The Smoky Mountain National Park, which there are some elk in North Carolina that are, on the North Carolina side. And every now and then we may get one that kind of scurries on to the national park side of things on the Tennessee side. But for all intents and purposes, we're talking about the Cumberland Mountains, just north of Knoxville, maybe about 45 minutes north. That's where we're looking at the population of elk we have in the state.
Okay, and I thought the land between the lakes may have been an area that you guys were managing as well.
Yeah, no, for that purposes, I think Kentucky's kind of got a handle on that, and we have actually trained. I was going to talk about this in a minute, but we did part of one of the releases that we did. Some of those elk that were on land between the lakes, we did release into the site that we're talking about there. So
okay, all right. Well, we'll get to that. I tell you what, Gary, what we like to do, we're going to loosen you up. Dudley will he's going to come at you with some questions and let you answer them. We'll learn a little bit more about you, and this will loosen you up and help you help us ask you more questions. So we're going to turn it over to Dudley.
All right, Garrett. So got a bit of an icebreaker here. We just want to get to know you better. Some of these will be, related to elk, and some of them won't. So just try to answer them quickly. Yes, no, maybe, both. However you feel comfortable answering.
And before we get started, Rapid Fire is brought to you by
Nutrient Ag Solutions.
That's right. They're our friends.
They are.
I bet, Garrett, up there somewhere around you probably see some Nutrient trucks pass. They're big ag product providers.
The biggest.
Yeah, great company.
They are. All right, Dudley.
All right. Are you ready?
Yep.
So when elk hunting, you're forced to choose one. Are you going to elk bugle or cow call? You can't do the other one all season.
I'm probably going to cow call.
Okay.
Meow.
Good answer. Yeah. All right. So we were arguing about this the other day. Best cheese for a burger, American cheese or any other kind of cheese?
Oh man, I'm gonna have to go with any other kind.
Okay. I hear you.
Yeah.
Fried green tomatoes or a tomato sandwich? What's more appetizing?
Fried green tomatoes all day, every day.
There you go. Would you rather fish a smallish stream or fish big water?
Probably big water.
Okay. Would you rather fill your freezer with one elk or 4 to 5 whitetails?
One elk.
What is your preference? Hunt an entire turkey season or hunt a week with an elk tag?
Oh man, I think I'd have to go the elk tag.
Yeah, that's tough.
That's a tough question, Dudley.
Yeah,
There's some tough rapid fires here.
All right, name 2 favorite tree species.
Oh, man, I guess I'd have to say white oak and a red oak.
There you go. Okay. Name a favorite broadleaf weed that elk prefer to eat.
Clover.
There you go. Music preference. Do you lean more towards rock or more towards country?
Probably country.
Pick one, bow hunt or gun hunt?
Bow hunt.
All right, and last but most certainly not least, do you think the moon phase affects elk movement?
Yeah. That's a tough one, man. I think there's a lot of places you could kind of go with that, but I'm going to say no on that one.
All right, I get it. I get it.
Yeah,
okay.
It depends.
That's it.
It depends. That's right.
I'm gonna go out on a limb and he would say weather trumps moon phase by a mile.
Yeah.
Probably so.
Absolutely.
Probably so. I like to make them tricky sometimes just for the fun of it.
That was a good job, Dudley.
All right, thank you, Dudley.
Yeah.
Look, guys, I want to ask the first question here.
Of course you do.
Yeah, well, so let me get it started here.
Mama hen.
Yeah.
So, Garrett, can you take us back a couple of hundred years or back to when there were elk in the Southeast and kind of
paint that picture for us, yeah.
Yeah, so I'd say a couple hundred years ago, you had some of those bigger herbivores, right? You had the eastern elk subspecies that was out here. If we're specifically talking about the eastern United States, which that subspecies, as we know, is extirpated now, or it's extinct. It's gone extinct. Sorry. And so, you also had buffalo out here, or bison back then, and so you had these animals that were really able to kind of manipulate the landscape with just them being here. You had a lot more early successional habitat just by default with all these big, ungulates that were just out mowing the landscape down and keeping it down. So, when we got rid of those bigger animals, and we have kind of modernized as a society, a lot of that, creation of habitat through natural settings has kind of gone away. We've got just kind of a closed canopy hardwood forest, and that is an issue if you're wanting to try to manage for species nowadays that are, as big as elk and that need a lot of food to eat. So, I think that's probably one of the biggest changes that we're looking like from then into now is just kind of the closed canopy forest that's kind of overtaken everything around that same area where we had those animals.
Can you point back to like a decade in time when the elk in Tennessee disappeared? Are there records and where hunters were saying they were seeing them up until a certain point?
Yeah, so the last elk I believe that was actually seen in Tennessee was an elk that was harvested, and that was actually in West Tennessee. I believe it was in Obion County. And I think that was 1865 was the last known record of an elk in the state, wild elk.
That's quite a while.
Yeah.
All right.
So they were antebellum.
So
Yeah.
my one elk story from the Southeast. So a friend of my dad's, my Uncle Bud's, was Mr. Allison Derby, who actually Derby is the little community down there south Sumter County. And he was a farmer, and pretty well known. He had a beautiful, pretty good sized tract of land, big hills, beautiful rolling timber. But and I think it was some of his family. There was a family that had a giant amount of land in, say, the 40s, 50s, maybe up to the early 60s. The Allison family, Allison Lumber Company was anyway. They own land from Demopolis, Alabama, I think, all the way to the Mississippi state line and all. Anyway, I went to their Allison Derby, camp when I was probably 30-ish, and there was a 6x6 elk in there. And I said, "Where'd you kill that elk?" This is Allison Jr. is like my age. He said, "No, my daddy killed that." I said, "Your daddy's never left this farm in his life." He said, "That's right." I said, "What?" He said, "Oh, there was a wild ranging elk herd here. Mr. Allison had some brought in, and they lived for quite a while till they shot them out too much or whatever. They didn't make it. But he killed that elk on his place in Sumter County, Alabama." I didn't know if that was in your records or not, asking him about it. Did he know about that? Because evidently they were around a little while. I guess they released some down there, but I don't know when or how long. I just know they were there at one point.
Yeah.
Periodically we will. Still we have had 3 elk that were harvested. Now, these are obviously after the restoration effort, but
right.
Periodically there have been historically through time other restoration projects that have occurred that have failed in other states.
Right.
So, it wouldn't surprise me if something like that did.
Yeah,
happen
that was
at some
probably
point.
him. Before, when you could just do it, he probably just
A private restoration.
Yeah, that's right. But he had so much land they could protect them up to a degree, and I'm sure he can tell us why the limitations of this far south of them too. I'm interested in that because they're such a glorious animal.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's how some of these, Sitka deer. I can't even pronounce some of them, but
fallow deer were all down in Wilcox County, Alabama,
Yeah.
at one time. And then they couldn't compete with the whitetails and died off.
Wow.
interesting stuff.
Well, so Lanny, have you got a question to get us started with? We want to learn about what's going on.
Yeah, just listening to the high points of this stuff. It's similar to the turkey stories and the deer stories and the restoration stories. But
it's incredible work.
It's really incredible work. To your point, but I was just wondering, I guess kind of the criteria you were looking for in the selection sites where you let them go, because we understood that for whitetails and turkeys and all that other thing. And is there a big physiological difference between the eastern elk, the one that is extinct, and where y'all captured these elk and brought them from? I think in Canada.
Yeah, that's right. So we have the Manitoban subspecies of elk, and as far as like kind of how they're interacting with the environment, I wouldn't say there's that much difference between what used to be here in the eastern elk subspecies and now, what we have now. But it's as far as an area where we are in the east, it's a lot different than some of the other areas that have done these restoration projects. Pennsylvania, other states that have done this. Obviously, Kentucky, that really altered the landscape so much, and was one of the big reasons why Kentucky's project really took off, and kind of why, the state of Tennessee really started seeing that success and saying, hey, why can't we get some of these elk over here where we know we've got some of that similar type of habitat? A lot of the coal industry that was, kind of in the area that we're talking about now, that's kind of what brought that on. So we're a little bit different in the fact that, we don't have as many wide open spaces. There's not as much mountaintop removal down here that there was, say, up there in eastern Kentucky. So a lot of our work in trying to bring the habitat back to that area is focused on, being able to find these small clearings wherever we can get to based on what the topography allows us to have, and being able to kind of put that wherever we can find it, if that makes sense.
So y'all are looking for is it 3 acres and less that they're putting these habitat structures in?
Yeah, so that's typically what most of the areas that we have that we're actually working on. I would say the vast majority of them are under 3 acres. Now, we do also have some sites that are bigger that we can get to, but I would say for the most part, most of the areas that we're working on are very small in size.
And I assume you're just trying to create forage.
These.
So
absolutely,
you're farming it, food plotting it.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, wow. So sorry, I'm asking so many questions.
No, go ahead.
As he talks, so how big, I guess, of like when I think, cows, people say rangeland, how many acres it takes to sustain one cow, or so how many acres, would it take of that particular kind of habitat to sustain one elk? Are we talking, 20, 30 acres, or is it hundreds of acres?
Yeah, so it's probably going to take a little bit more as far as size goes, than those kind of 3 acre plots, and they're going to utilize a lot of the other habitat that's surrounding those areas as well. A lot of people think that elk are more of a grazing species, which they do, just based on where they can kind of get the most bang for their buck is kind of, in those grassy fields, or, where we have a whole lot of forbs and things of that nature, but they'll really browse a whole lot just like a deer will.
Yeah.
As far as having a rough number there, I don't really have a number based per se on how big is needed to kind of sustain a cow over that period of time. I think a lot of that has to do with the type of habitat that's within a specific home range.
Yeah, how good.
So I think that's kind of variable based on, where you are and what's out there for that animal to be able to uptake.
And one more question, I'll quit. Are they moving like they do out west? Because in my experience, they were, coming down from elevation and going up to elevation. And then as the habitat changes, when the winter comes in, they're getting pushed further down because of elevation. Are those the same kind of moving characteristics that they see out west? Are you seeing those in East Tennessee as well?
No, not on this part. With our much more mild climate here as an out west, our elk pretty much stay put. They don't move a whole lot compared to some of the other populations do.
Interesting.
Do they struggle with the heat of the summer at all?
Yeah. If it gets really hot, they'll, we may lose a couple every year to, hemorrhagic disease. But for the most part, I'd say that the bigger issues that we're worried about are focused on like meningeal worm and things of that nature for disease.
Well, let me ask this. Maybe there's another way to come to Lanny's answer, but do you guys say, well, we need to have 2,000 acres for 20 head, or when y'all are trying to put together an area to release, is there a minimum acreage that you need for whatever size release you're planning?
That's a good question. I don't think we've kind of got that specific number in place there. I would say it probably takes, a couple, 1,000, I would say, to kind of sustain a few elk.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I could see that because I bet they just move all over.
Oh, I
the
could
place.
too.
Yeah.
I mean, I was thinking like these areas they're releasing them in, what they, how big they have to be, and how they determine how many they can let go there.
Do you see the white-tailed deer and the elk kind of getting along together? Is all that? Are they pretty compatible?
Yeah, around here we don't really see an issue with it. Definitely where we're at, the deer population is a lot lower than say some of the other areas out in West Tennessee, just because we have a lack of that agriculture production than what we do over here. They're mountain deer, so there's a kind of a sparse difference there between what we've got out west, and so there's a lot of area for these animals to kind of move around with, and so they really are not interacting that much, and it doesn't really affect much things going on from what we've seen.
Yeah,
I guess they've been hanging out together for millennia anyway, so they may be kind of used to each other.
Yeah, I would think that the biggest thing of all was just the food, period. I know there's other, climatic issues or whatever, but seems like, evaluating something that you can only go so far. You can help a lot with planting, like stuff we have, like clover especially, like you said, but it seems like the native browse is so critical to having the right kind for them, because it's different everywhere.
Yeah,
Fire's got to be good.
Yeah, I would think so.
Speaking of native browse, I know a lot of this elk population inhabits reclamated coal areas, and I know in the past, with good intentions, we have planted a lot of non-native invasive species on these reclamated areas, like autumn olive, multiflora rose, things like that. How do the elk handle that? I mean, do they like it, or is it a problem? I mean, I'd be interested.
Yeah,
to hear about
it's kind of a double-edged sword. On one hand, at least our elk, we worked with the University of Tennessee Knoxville a few years back to look at the diet of our elk, what our elk were eating in winter and early spring. And what they found was that our elk were really eating a whole lot of those types of things: multiflora rose, blueberry bush, a lot of autumn olive, shrubby type species that are out there, woody type species during that time. So from that perspective, I think when we don't have green on the ground, some of those species can still provide a food source to sustain our herd, at the capacity that it's at right now. Obviously, what they found once it started greening up in early spring, a whole lot of what they're eating shift to what you would think: forbs, clover, broadleaf weeds like that. So, you don't want to have a whole lot of invasives covering up the ground, and when we could potentially be knocking that back and bringing back a lot of the native vegetation that we also know that they like. But I still think that they still can have a purpose to some degree to be able to sustain them over the winter.
Interesting.
Absolutely.
And then, when you look out in Arizona and New Mexico and you see what it appears they're eating, it's just this woody, dry stuff that a whitetail wouldn't even consider chewing on. Right. You would think in Tennessee that would be some pretty darn good food compared to what their cousins out west are having to deal with.
Yeah, and I think some of that too. Not to necessarily. I never want to boast invasives a lot, but I think again some of that goes back to we're dealing with a 700-pound animal here.
Yeah. Well, maybe they've
got to have a lot of food, and they're pretty much eating anything that they can get a hold of.
Yeah. Well, maybe they can help cut it back a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. I'm saying if the invasives are good for them, I can deal with them.
Mm-hmm. So, Garrett, before we get into the research and the history of this program, can you kind of explain what is the people in Tennessee, what do they think about this hunt that y'all have every year? Are they a lot of people applying for the tags? What do we have to do to be able to get one of these rifle tags?
Yeah, it's definitely highly sought after. We have around 10,000 applicants annually right now. And it fluctuates from year to year, to some degree. But right now, we just in the past year, we've increased our tag numbers to we're at 19 right now. So that's as high as it's ever been. We have an archery season and a general gun season as well as a youth season, and we have 8 of those permits are for gun season, and then one of those there's 9. One of those is actually raffled off by a nonprofit organization with those funds that will ultimately go back into the elk program to assist with habitat projects and things of that nature. And then we have 9 permits that are available for the archery season, and then 1 youth permit. All of those are all bull only. So we're still, being conservative there. We don't want to open that up to harvest of the females because we know that's what's driving the population.
Absolutely.
But right now, that's we're booming with tags for Tennessee.
Can non-residents apply?
Yes, non-residents can apply.
Right.
I believe right now the non-residents are limited to 25%, up to 25% of the total draw.
Huh.
So
there's a chance,
if
Bobby.
there is someone that's out of state that's drawn, pretty much I think 2 permits is the max, and then the system pretty much just cuts it off to non-residents.
Gotcha.
Well, that's fair.
Yeah,
It
no,
really is.
I like it.
Yeah. Well, and 10,000 applications, that's a sizable
1 in 500 chance if there's almost 20 tags, so there's 19 tags.
Well, I'm just glad to hear that there's that many people that are interested in it.
Oh,
and
gosh.
No doubt about it.
participating in it. Yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
And I mean, I'm looking at, I assume, I'm looking at this, it says approximately 400 elk are in the population. So that's a good population to be able to manage and to be able to provide, this is exactly how many we need to take out at the most. So pretty good numbers there.
Good success rate.
Especially if they're still growing. It's all about what health is for them, and we hunt around it,
So, Garrett, what about what research have y'all done that just really interests you, that you're fired up about? Tell us about that aspect of the project.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm definitely love to be involved with any of the research that we have going on. I've kind of hit on a couple of these already, but one thing we talked about obviously was the diet composition study that we did, and kind of how that got brought around was a research project where we were looking at different genetic aspects of our herd. So we had some Dr. Lisa Muller at the University of Tennessee and some of her graduate students that were going out and collecting a whole bunch of scat throughout our WMA there and taking those back to the lab, and was able to analyze some of the genetic sloughs, the material that sloughs off of the scat pellets. And so through that, we were able to get a whole lot of good information. We were able to, look at the various aspects of where our elk were at upon release, to kind of back up a little bit. So when we brought the elk in back in the early to late 2000s, they were brought in from 2 different sections of Elk Island National Park. So we had this group of elk that was on one side, on the north side, and it was kind of divided, I believe, by a road of some sort. And there was a south side of the population. This was all a fenced-in population. And when we brought those elk over, we released those elk from one side, the south side, onto one side of the WMA. And then when they did the additional releases, they brought in and they released those elk from the north side on another side of the WMA. So we wanted to try to see, obviously we have Interstate 75 that runs right through North Cumberland WMA. And we wanted to kind of see, how that road is influencing intermixing between those kind of 2 subpopulations. And then kind of to follow up on that, we obviously have the Kentucky herd and the Ed Carter unit up that way of the WMA that, we wanted to see if we're starting to see any intermixing between the Kentucky herd as well. So we were answering a lot of good questions there to kind of see how our genetics were playing out. We also were able to look at different sex ratios, birth rates, and then we were also to kind of look at, based on our scat, identifying individuals there, we were able to get kind of a local population size for where that study was looking at. So a lot of cool stuff on that project.
Well, let me ask this. So where these elk came from, let's just say, could you give a number of what, like a mature bull, would he score, say, 330?
Oh, here we go.
And then I'd like to
Here we
understand
go.
what the elk in Tennessee, what a mature bull is scoring.
What's the trophy
is it
thing?
about the same?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We've got pretty limited sample size, obviously, with us compared to Kentucky, but I'd have to talk with them and kind of get more information about kind of what they're averaging out. But I would say, we've definitely had some larger bulls that have been harvested, up into the 300s there. But I would say that there's definitely been a few on here that we've seen that we know that have been bigger, but they haven't gotten harvested. So we feel like we definitely do have some bigger elk that are down here. It's just I don't think we've really yet to have one that's been shot that's like, wow, this is a huge animal in comparison to other states and things of that nature. So
yeah.
So what about the capture of them in Canada? Were you involved in that? And what was kind of the tactics behind it?
Yeah, so I should have gave some more context earlier. These captures and releases occurred in the early 2000s. So I was just a young pup when that was going on.
Gotcha.
So they had a total of 201 elk that they released over, I believe it was 5 captures, I believe, from 2000 to 2008. It's been some time since we brought those over here.
So after those initial stockings, then it's just been managing the herd from there. That hadn't been any more. Wow.
Yeah, the big reason we haven't it hasn't been brought up to do any more stocking right now is obviously for disease. We're with CWD and things of that nature. The transport and travel is just such a big risk, and that's kind of why nobody's really doing any of that right now.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
How'd they catch it? With helicopters?
So that's a good question. I'm not sure. I'm assuming that they probably had some type of corral trap or darting. I don't believe they did any type of like helicopter capture.
We had a guest on here that did that. Didn't
Yeah, we had that he rode in the helicopters. He would
darted them,
they would land, and he'd jump down and wrap them up.
They lift them out of there.
Heck of a guy.
Yeah, it was
a lot
good.
of
Yeah,
fun.
he must have been on that crew.
Well, so Garrett, you're involved though in capturing calves, and you're studying the calf recruitment. And can you kind of explain that whole process to us? How do y'all do that?
Yeah, definitely. So, to kind of go back to your question there, we did use helicopters for that project that we're working on right now, and are continuing. We're really in the preliminary stages of that. It's just like you said, these helicopters will get out there. We contract that out through a third party company, and they are just really efficient and able to capture these cows, and they bring them back to us and fly them back to a workup site, and we have a crew there that's ready to get them down and anesthetize them and go on and do the workup so that we can get them collared and get the data off of them.
That doesn't sound like that's an easy process.
No, it takes a village to go through with a project like that. We had a lot of people that were involved in that the last couple of years. So yeah, we will pretty much take all the help that we can get to carry out those projects.
Can you kind of go into, and it always amazes me, we've had a number of biologists and professors like it, the people that are wanting to study these animals, and I'm always amazed to hear the care and the effort that you guys go to make sure the animal stays the least amount of stress. Mm-hmm. Oh, so Garrett, can you explain the processes you guys go through? I'm imagining that these elk calves, y'all are worried about stressing them out. You're worried about getting them back to their mama. And can you go through some of the process of how y'all care for them?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think what you're asking earlier is just the process of, obviously we have to care for the cows first, right? When we get the cows in, the biggest thing that we worry about is the heat. That's the biggest thing is monitoring the temperature and making sure that they stay cool. Even from the process of planning and everything like that, we're always doing these types of captures that are really stressful in the wintertime when the temperatures are really cold, because we know that they're going to be exerting a whole lot of energy and their temperature is going to be going up. So, we have multiple folks that are there ready with buckets of water to make sure that they get cooled off. Our state veterinarian even this year brought kind of those little handheld sprayers of alcohol so that you could spray on them and through the evaporation process could cool them off that way. So we employ a whole lot of strategies to try to keep them safe whenever we're going through that process. As far as the calves are concerned, it's not as big of an issue with them most of the time, especially when they're really young. You would think that they would get super stressed out, but when they're fresh born and we're able to get to them really quickly, a lot of times they'll just stay really still, and they're trying to employ that kind of strategy to kind of just remain hidden. And so we'll just put a blindfold on them to kind of reduce that visual stress, and we're able to just work them up as quickly as we can, and then they're on their way once they get their collar and we take a few different measurements off of them.
Wow. That, if that'd have to be a fun to work on something like that. And it just being around those young animals, and that would be a lot of fun.
Just helping to, bring them back to that area has to be pretty rewarding.
Yeah.
What are some of the headwinds that y'all have had in bringing them back? Is it people or population driven? What are some of these challenges?
Yeah, so back when the process got started, it was the agency did a really good job of being able to get public input, and there was a whole lot of public meetings that were involved to try to get the idea of how the public thought about this. And in this area, there's not a whole lot of tourism and things of that nature that is here. So having an elk population here was kind of an opportunity of a nice big economic driver in terms of recreation and viewing, obviously the hunting aspect at some point in time, and also just from the standpoint of the lack of agriculture. I think that there probably wouldn't have been a lot of support for a reintroduction effort or restoration effort here had there been a lot of agriculture and folks that were worried about disease and depredation of their farms and their cattle and all that stuff. So it's just kind of a really good success story of a lot of folks that were diligent and getting a lot of input from the public, and being able to kind of, once we figured out that there was that support there, moving forward and working with agencies like the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation and others to be able to get the project underway.
Wow. It kind of reminds me, Taxi said the other day about Neil not taking no for an answer.
That's right.
It's kind of sounded like somebody said, look, we've got a chance to do this, and they found the perfect place.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. There's got to be some problems having these big antlered animals walking around that part of somebody riding down the road gets a little too excited, a little too early. Are you having any poaching issues?
Yeah, we'll get a couple every year that we have to deal with. There's obviously anytime you've got those types of animals, that's something that you have to deal with. And so we work with local organizations here that are able to provide reward money, and our law enforcement and staff, they do a really good job of being able to get the word out to folks, and we've been able to have success with those types of programs in the past. We also have a law here in Tennessee where the fines get stiffer and stiffer based on the size of the animal. So for every additional point that's on that bull, if it gets harvested, the fines go up and up in addition to that. So there are a lot of things that are in place to kind of deter that, but it does happen.
Never heard of that. That's a pretty good idea.
You can't keep something like that quiet up there, though. If you're a guy and you poach one of those, you're going to tell somebody. Sooner or later, somebody's going to
ain't going to believe this.
Tell on you, so to speak. And you can't just take it to a taxidermist.
No, that's true. So tell us a little bit about the 10-year elk management plan.
Yeah, so we're currently on I believe it's the 8th year of that plan. We'll have a new one that's going to be going up here in the next couple of years. We're going to get going on that. And, pretty much it just outlines obviously a background of the elk restoration project. We talk a lot about the different goals that we have for the elk program and the elk population. We cover a whole lot of things. We have a habitat goal. We have a, kind of a, what's the word I'm looking for, like a damage type goal where we're dealing with nuisance elk. We have different objectives within those goals. And then other things that we have in there as well, we have a conflict matrix that you can go check out for how we kind of deal with nuisance issues and things of that nature. And just kind of outlines kind of the direction that we want to try to bring the program forward with the population and the habitat and pretty much all things that we know are going to be huge influencers of the population.
Do you so you're in year 8 of 10 right now, and I'm sure there's going to be the next version of the 10-year plan. Do you think that any major differences between kind of the objectives from the first 10 year versus the second 10 years?
Oh, that's a good question. I think as the elk population continues to grow, and we obviously as humans begin to still expand and urbanization and things of that nature, always one of the big things that we're going to have to look at is how are we going to work with the public in dealing with different types of nuisance issues. Habitat is another one. We know that our elk population can only grow to a certain point to what the habitat can sustain. Right. We're talking about carrying capacity here, obviously, but how are we going to be able to increase what we need, what the elk need out in these areas, whether that's through land acquisition or being able to work with other folks to be able to obtain funding to put more habitat on the ground if we're wanting to try to grow the herd more in certain areas. So I think defining more specific kind of objectives within each goal in those two categories will probably be important.
Yeah.
So
need more forage.
And I don't think I heard this. Is there from a long-term planning standpoint, is there a target area that would be kind of the outer limits of what's their best sustainable area, whether it's 2 counties, 10 counties, 8 counties, whatever, based on topography and available food source and all that you're aiming for long-term? Is there kind of a long-term plan for that area?
Yeah. So right now, I don't think there'll be any change as far as that goes. We do have a 5-county elk restoration zone.
I got you.
And that will probably be the kind of a goal is to continue to maintain our population within those boundaries. Just again, because we know that that's where the public acceptance was when the program was, kind of started.
Right.
And we know that kind of habitat is going to be the area there is going to be the area that we're able to manage the most.
Lenny, I had to tell you, hunting with you've got your phone in your pocket. You're constantly checking onX.
Yep. Very valuable key features all in those things. It really is. From the compass mode to recent imagery, it really helps you understand where you are spatially, where you're headed, where a turkey is, where he was. It's a heck of a tool to use in the spring woods.
I didn't realize that they're updating these maps every couple of weeks.
Yeah, I'd have never known about that clear cut that you were hunting if I didn't have that recent imagery.
Well, and you could share some waypoints with me.
I could share some points with you. You're exactly right.
It has that capability.
It does have that sharing capability, which is great. You're wanting to show me where your goblin turkeys are.
Oh, man. onX, it's a great app.
It's a great app. So
guys can go to onxmaps.com/hunt and use code Mossy Oak to get 20% off.
There you go.
Hey y'all, Jim Ronquist here with Drake Waterfowl and Old Tom Turkey Products, talking about some of the new lineup for this spring. One of the more popular is the SWT collection, or Spiderweb technology. This is a highly breathable micro-vented stretch fabric for maximum silent mobility with a durable water-repellent finish that'll keep you cool and keep you dry and keep you going in the spring woods. Be sure and check it out at a dealer near you or drakewaterfowl.com/Old Tom.
So do you think, I was thinking, do you plan on restoring or planting some in some new areas outside of that to grow it more later? Or do you think having the healthiest population in your core area there will just kind of continue to bleed out? What's the longer term strategy? Or is it those 5 counties are really all it's going to be? I'm just curious.
Yeah,
I'm thinking I love
question.
I was thinking you let them go everywhere.
I think it's definitely something to where we want to continue to monitor as well, right? We have had elk, I think I was mentioning this earlier, that are already starting to disperse. We've had, I think, three. We had an incidental take program, which I should have talked about earlier. We were talking about the hunting aspect, that hunters are allowed to harvest an elk if it goes outside of those 5 counties.
Wow.
So, if you're a deer hunter and you have a deer permit and you're out hunting, you are allowed to shoot that elk.
Wow.
If you see it outside of the restoration zone, bull or cow. So, and we have had 3 of those. So we know that we do have some elk that are already moving out of the restoration zone. But I think the bigger picture, what we're trying to keep at is, okay, within the area that we have defined, we know that we still have a lot of space here and a lot of areas that don't necessarily have elk, but have the potential to have elk. How can we better those areas and the habitat within those areas for other elk that are in our area to kind of branch out a little bit and to, be able to be successful within those areas?
That seems smart.
How much of that area is government land versus private land?
Great question.
Yeah, so kind of one of the bigger reasons why the program got started here obviously was that large public land aspect. We do have what we manage is the North Cumberland Wildlife Management Area, which is where all the releases took place, and it's our largest WMA in the state. It's about 200,000 acres in size. So that was kind of one of the big drivers of we knew this is an area that we had the ability to manage from a public standpoint, and one of the reasons why we chose this location.
Perfect.
Yeah, there might be some people piled up on those county lines.
And I'm just a random hunting question. What's the rut timing up there for elk?
We actually work with the University of Tennessee and a graduate student, Daily Metz, out there. I think it's been a year or 2 ago. We put out a bunch of acoustic detectors. It's essentially just like a box that collects sound data. And we put those out at different places on the WMA, and we were able to get some data on bugling chronology. So we know based on that data, the timing of the rut based on the time of the year, when it peaks, and also the time of day. And, to our, glad surprise, what we saw was that we saw peak bugling occur during the last week of September into the first couple weeks of October. At dawn and dusk was when those would kind of peak during the day. So that kind of aligns right with the structure of our hunts now.
Okay. And that's pretty similar. I'm not a big elk enthusiast, but that's pretty similar timing to the rest of the elk populations, it seems like.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All the different subspecies.
Oh, y'all talking about, is there rut
We're talking
synchronized
about
with?
with the rest of the North American elk.
Yeah. So it is synchronized. Okay. Look, I've got a quick question, Garrett. When do you apply for one of these tags?
Yeah, so the application period is usually throughout the whole month of February there. And so you have a couple months. That's usually when the period ends is late February.
And are you allowed to take them on private land during the elk hunt?
Yes, you can take them on private land within the elk restoration zone as long as that hunter is able to obtain the permission there, obviously.
Okay. And do most folks usually hire someone as a guide or outfitter?
Yeah, I would say that probably right now we're probably about 50-50, maybe 60-40 of hunters that are actually hiring a guide. Probably favors that probably a little bit. But we do have a lot of hunters every year that they don't go that route and are still successful. We have about a 70 to 80% success rate right now in Tennessee, which we're glad to say is pretty high.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah, it really is.
So, I've got a question I don't think I've heard, and again, if it's been redundant, I apologize. So, currently, I'm only aware, not being a huge student of, I love this animal so much, but Arkansas, right? Kentucky and Tennessee. Is that pretty much the current east of the Mississippi? Well, that's not even east of Mississippi, eastern U.S. Restoration areas right now?
Yeah, for the South, let's see. So you said Tennessee, Arkansas, and
Kentucky.
Missouri.
Kentucky.
Kentucky too. I mean, Missouri also.
Kentucky. Yeah, Kentucky. Missouri has a population.
Great.
You've got Wisconsin that has a population.
Wow.
Minnesota actually has a few elk. Pennsylvania has some elk.
That's right. Yep.
Virginia and West Virginia actually have a small population.
Yeah, I was thinking, I don't know it intimately, but I was thinking that Appalachian area would be prime all up and down it maybe.
Right. Yep. Kind of for a lot of the same reasoning too. Not a lot of agriculture.
Right.
It's kind of the prime place if you're going to do a restoration project.
So are most of those stable and growing, you think?
Yeah, I believe they are. I can't really speak directly to those,
Sure.
but from what I've been told, yeah, they're kind of progressing.
I mean,
well.
that's so exciting. I know it's going to be a careful, slow process, and we're letting people hunt too and all. But the fact that they can continue to have their footprint and be healthy more and more in the East is just so exciting to me. And I feel like and I'm thinking, I'm always thinking like generations past my lifetime about stuff these days when you get old. But that it's like an insurance policy for the species we love so much that you could establish a new area that these will evolve in pretty short order, probably have already started to the ways of the East and the things to survive better and whatever, and it'll be a little differentiated from the Rocky Mountain herd. And longer term, for the U.S. to enjoy this great animal in an expanded area, it just warms my heart big time.
Mm-hmm. Even just be able to hear them.
Yes.
Even if you
my
can't
gosh.
hunt them, if you can just hear them.
If I could just go hear them around here,
just
I'd
hear 'em, yep.
faint.
Yep.
That's on my bucket list, by the way. I've obviously, I've been some, but not a lot, and killed some with a bow, which is such a rush. But
tasty too.
And I'm the world's worst homeboy. I don't travel much, but that's always kind of been on my bucket list is to bow hunt elk in the East somewhere. So I don't know why that's so
We'll start
appealing
putting
to me.
in for a tag here. They do sell one. You saw that. They auction one
the
off.
sell one is, I'm like, me. I love to buy land, and I'm like, would I elk hunt or would I buy 100 acres somewhere? I mean, it's just so expensive.
Yeah.
So I've been buying land instead of elk hunting.
I don't know that I've ever heard Toxie say what was on his bucket list.
I
There's
like
not
it.
much.
No, that's a good one.
Killing an elk in the East with a bow. I'm gonna put that on my.
What I did with my dad the other day was probably top of the list. But that, with my sons and son-in-law and all there. But other than that,
Do y'all have a governor's tag, Garrett, on the elk?
No, sir. No, we just have the that raffle tag.
I know they have a governor's tag. I've heard of people trying to buy it in Kentucky before.
Yeah.
I think.
I think.
But I think they have a lot more. They have a
They
lot
did
more
buy
elk
it.
up there. Yeah.
Interesting.
What
So
else?
sounds like we need to call the governor.
Yeah, or our friend in Kentucky. He might be able to out there. So, go ahead.
I
Doug.
want to ask about this meningeal worm. Have we hit on that?
He mentioned it, but that's it.
Okay, it sounds like a problem, and I've heard of it, but that's about as far as I've gone with that. Can you extrapolate on that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the things that pretty much every elk, biologist is having to deal with here in the East is meningeal worm. And it's what it is it's a parasite that completes has its life cycle in a snail, completes its life cycle in a snail. And what will happen is these elk will get out and they'll graze and they'll uptake that snail. And that snail ends up infecting the elk. And it's something that it can affect deer and whitetails here. They've evolved with it. And so they've kind of developed this kind of immunity for the most part of having to deal with that. But these elk are not really used to that in these more mild climates. And so, it's something that's always we're monitoring. We probably have about 20 or so that we have to take in for necropsy every year that has it. And so it's just kind of one of those things. The elk populations, it's typically not something that's going to drive the population downward in a downward trend, but it's always something that we want to monitor. The elk kind of just deal with it as a population.
Interesting. So how does it affect the elk? How does it hurt them?
Yeah, very very similar to some of these other things that we deal with, hemorrhagic disease. There's you'll have elk that are kind of circling in one area. They just they become emaciated. It just because it's in the brain, right, and it deals with the neurological issues there. So, kind of what you would see with chronic wasting disease is kind of very similar in those aspects.
And they get it from eating the snail?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's not good.
Escargot.
Escargot. Yeah.
I'm not going to eat any snails. I'll just tell you that. So, Garrett, is there anything about this program that when you're a young guy and you've gotten involved in this and this hasn't been going on that long, but is there anything about it that's just like amazed you that I had no idea that this was going on?
Yeah, so from just the standpoint of just kind of the public, I think that it's been in general. There's just folks really have a deep love for elk in Tennessee. We have an elk viewing tower here that oftentimes we will go up and if we're doing surveys or going to check on certain animals, there'll be 20 or 30 people that are out there just going to see these animals, and it draws attention from people that are miles and miles away. I think somebody had told me that's been here a lot longer than I have that somebody came to look at elk from England one time.
Wow.
It's you hear stuff like that, and it's just it's really cool to see what a wide ranging kind of a draw that these animals have on people, and that support there from that side of things. So
yeah, they're majestic cool. Is a great word to explain an elk.
Yeah, and I mean they're so big but so agile. I mean running up those mountains. I get it now.
We've all been to hunting camps and been messing around, and somebody comes back and says, I saw a deer. It was as big as a Hartford elk. Yeah, that's right. But there are places in Tennessee where you might actually that could happen to you.
Yeah, but I had a question that thought about a minute ago in the elk observation tower thing. It's so cool, and especially I guess when they're bugling to be so cool. But so you have a 5-county area, and so I'm assuming there's a part of that that's the most density, best habitat, most elk, and it's probably where that tower they built is. But I'm just curious, do you have a certain area within the 5 counties that is no hunting whatsoever, like a sanctuary, or is it?
Yeah, so pretty much all the hunters that are drawn for these tags, very few have harvested, since we've had the hunt, have harvested an elk off of one of their zones that they're drawn for. We have 10 elk hunting zones, which are all on North Cumberland WMA, so part of that 2,000 acres. And, I would say that most of our elk that we have in our population, it's kind of hard to say based on, everything. It's always hard to kind of get that number, but I would say that most of them are contained within the WMA itself, or a large portion of them are on the WMA.
Right.
And so, if you're looking for a high density place to go and see an elk, our elk viewing tower, the agency did a great job of selecting that to be the place to go to see elk, because you're going to go up there and it doesn't even have to be the rut. Most times you have a really good opportunity to see something up there.
So is there a no hunting zone anywhere, or is it all up?
Yeah, so where the viewing tower is, I should have specified this earlier, but where the viewing tower is itself, there is no hunting allowed there, as well as the access road leading into the hunting or the viewing tower.
It'd be piled up in that tower otherwise.
Y'all know me, I'm a big fan of that on every species.
You're the sanctuary man.
Kind of we've learned too. Yep. Not because of me, because the research and biologists it's super critical for ducks, deer, turkeys for sure. Yep. But then to know that's what they're employing with elk too. I think it's so vital to have somewhere safe space for them.
Yeah,
for sure. What else do we need to ask you? What else needs to be explained about this? We've covered a lot.
Yeah, no, I think I'll just follow up one other thing to what you asked me earlier, of kind of like what I've kind of seen that has kind of floored me a little bit too is, just the amount of people that we work with at our agency at North Cumberland, the managers that work there, take a second to really brag on a lot of the folks that I work with in-house that really take a sense of ownership to the management of this species and really have a passion for it. We have 3 area managers. We have a WMA manager and tons of technicians and equipment operators that are all extremely passionate about elk management in Tennessee. And so that was one of the cool things that I've, since I've taken over in this job, that I've gotten to work with other people who have such a huge heart for this species. Mm-hmm. So that's always something that's really cool to see.
Yeah.
Do y'all have any kind of do y'all let the public hunt for sheds in the spring?
Yes. Yep. That's in Tennessee. It's 100% legal. You can come out anytime and shed hunt on the WMA.
Have you ever found a bull antlers?
Not yet. No. I've actually been with some folks at the same time that they've found them and been like, geez, I'm jealous of this guy. But there's a lot of folks that get out there. I've heard some folks of even getting out there early morning with headlamps and trying to beat the crowd. So it's definitely a popular activity.
It's serious awesome. Business.
Yeah, it is.
I thought about, he talked about the area managers and the people. It's kind of thought about Mr. Fred Pringle on the turkeys, and what a pioneer and whatever. But those are, we talk about it a lot. Today's world, the world puts like people as heroes. And I'm not knocking them, but like sports people and whatever, political figures, good gosh. And I think about all our veterans. Those are heroes.
Oh, yeah.
And I also think about, for us that love hunting, it should be these people and the wardens and the biologists and the area managers, the people like Fred Pringle that restored turkeys, but these people that are doing that work, those are the freaking heroes of hunting, not some guy we watch on, or one of us, or some guy on some TV show somewhere.
Like Bobby.
It's kind of like, it reminded me of the analogy of like who should really be a hero.
Yeah.
Broader, like our veterans should be a hero over some pro football player,
Absolutely.
That's right.
Yeah, I went to a meeting the other night. It was the forestry graduation ceremony. Yeah. And I ran into somebody, and I was like, you were like my Mickey Mantle when I was 19 years old.
That's cool, dude.
And he was just a bottomland hardwood researcher that worked for the USDA, and I was like, I finally get to meet the guy.
Bottomland, you're talking about his wardrobe, though, right? That was his wardrobe, Bottomland?
Well, it's called the Bottomland Hardwood. I can't remember, but
they stole my trademark.
They did.
That's cool. Very cool.
Well, Garrett, you're our hero. Is basically
100%. And he works amongst heroes too.
Yeah, you and your crew.
Yep.
I've got a question. I saw you were the deer program coordinator. Can you explain, some of the differences, or is it similar? I know elk is a smaller population, smaller area, but what are some of the differences between the two gigs?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say in the couple years that I've kind of been involved with the elk program, I would say that the job it allows you to be more defined in kind of some of the objectives and things that you're trying to accomplish. Obviously, where I'm at now is my office is based where the elk are, and I'm kind of in and amongst everything that's going on, generally speaking. And so, I think it's been a change of being able to kind of work face to face with folks and, kind of being in the mix of things that are going on throughout the day. If that kind of makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
With deer, you're working with the species that spans, all across the state, and obviously there is some overlap there with some of the, nuisance issues and things of that nature. You kind of, when you're having to deal with some of those things, you're obviously in it. I couldn't deal with all the deer issues across the state, which requires, tons of law enforcement officers and, everything. But I think it's just more of a defined area that you're trying to set those goals at.
Okay.
Yeah. Focused.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would like to think that was really, really good training for what you're doing now.
Yeah, it's been good. I think both positions I've been able to learn a lot, and I've just kind of been working with deer for a long time. I really enjoyed it, and I think it was just something new. I've always been fascinated with elk too, and so it was a cool opportunity for me for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Richie, let's ask him a trivia question.
All right.
Sure.
Garrett, get pull your bootstraps up. Now we're going to ask you a trivia question.
All right.
And we've got a trivia partner that helps supply. It's called the Peanut Patch.
Do you like the Cajun or the regular?
I'm a Cajun guy.
I'm a Cajun guy.
Everybody's Cajun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like the Cajun, but my
kids
innards don't really like the Cajun.
My kids like the regulars.
Mm-hmm. I'm a regular guy.
He's a regular guy.
Just a good old regular guy.
Garrett, I know you like boiled peanuts.
I'm definitely a peanut guy for sure.
Yeah. So any little gas station, you can go to
Walmart,
Kroger.
they're everywhere.
Ask for the peanut patch.
They're the best. They're like homemade.
All right, Rich.
All right. We had a listener who left a review on YouTube, Colorado Spock.
Colorado Spock. All right.
Okay. Well, Colorado Spock has won one of the nutrient measuring cups.
All right.
How about that? Yeah. We'll get that sent out there too.
Surely we can put something in the cup with it.
Yeah.
We'll give him a hat or something.
Yeah. All right.
So, all right, here we go, Garrett. Question is, what Tennessee congressman was an avid bear hunter? He claimed to have killed 105 bears in 1 year.
Is this a multiple choice?
And I'm going to ask
Old
over
school.
the limit too.
I'm going to say he's not like current, maybe.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, this is old school.
Congressman.
There's some songs made about him.
Oh, I know who you're talking
From
about.
Tennessee, and he was a congressman.
Yeah.
Did he?
Big
The
bear
congressman
hunter.
threw me off, but yeah.
Davy Crockett, maybe?
Oh, wow.
Killed it.
There we
He got
go.
it. There we
Boom.
go. All right. Good job.
You're so unsuspecting sounding to be a genius.
Lanny, can you sing that song?
I'll guess.
I don't know the whole
Davy
thing. I do remember Davy Crockett, but I'm kind of going to the Eddie Salter King of the 10-inch beard thing. That's not what it is.
Wasn't there some story about somebody finding a tree that had been etched in and it said his name, but he misspelled killed a bear? It was like he misspelled it.
Bar.
Sealed a
Bar.
bar.
Yeah.
Sealed
Bar.
a bar.
Ball.
That's a tall tale of Bobby.
Yeah.
Sounds like Bobby wrote a book
No,
about
I
it.
think that's an internet. I've seen that same
Yeah.
image.
Is it on the internet?
Yeah.
Oh, it's got to
Gotta
be
be
true.
true.
then.
Gotta be
Yeah, it's
true.
got to be true. If it's on the
On the net.
Garrett, you've been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Very much so.
I can
Thank you
tell
for what you're doing up there.
Yeah,
It's cool
thank,
stuff.
Thank you for your service.
You're
Yes,
a real
sir.
serious guy, I can tell. Well, I've been nothing but impressed with the.
Bobby's. He's usually. He hadn't asked you if you had any turkeys.
Yeah,
up
no,
there, but
he's so
he's
wore
gonna
out
get
from this
around
hunt.
to it.
Yeah.
So
I can't believe you let that get by him.
you know what? I would check to see. He bought his license. You know,
You do have a Tennessee license.
Yeah, his rescue mission.
Look at him. He perked up.
His parachute to not have a goose egg on his record for this spring has actually been the state of Tennessee, not Alabama or Mississippi.
Yeah, I'm a fan of Tennessee.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
yep.
I'll tell you guys, there's a lot of turkeys to be hunted up here at the WMA.
Oh,
Can't
you're Bobby's new best friend.
Would you mind dropping us some Onyx pins, and we'll be right up there to see you.
Yes, sir.
You know, you could find out turkey hunting. You might find a big elk shed.
Sure.
Best description I've heard of elk if people have never been. And it says 700-pound turkey, 700-pound turkey with a nose, basically. Yeah.
Dudley, he doesn't get enough credit. Dudley is a great.
Dudley doesn't get enough
great
credit.
guy.
He's
He
Mr. Know-it-all. What are you talking about?
He killed a big elk this
He
past
should.
year.
He
Yeah.
did kill a big elk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Mac drew a tag,
Iron
and
sights.
Rusty drew a tag this year. So the Mossy Oak
They'll never
crew-
be there. Hey, athletic ability is one of the things required for
Yeah.
New Mexico elk hunting. Whew.
For sure.
You want to tell the story of your elk, Laney?
Which one?
He's killed
The
two.
seven shots.
the latest.
Hey, man.
I think he told that story.
Yeah, I have to. We did a whole
7
podcast.
shots, Garrett.
And how many times did I hit him?
I don't
7
know.
times.
Oh, no,
Seven.
no, no,
Yeah,
no,
oh, yeah. No, there was 7 holes in
Yeah,
him.
the hoof and
Thank
the
you,
tail
guys.
and the
Hey,
horns.
He had
and the
7
ears.
holes in him.
Yeah.
That's all I got to say.
So,
Hey,
Garrett-
and he went to the freezer.
Well, we've got a sponsor, Nosler. They make this great ammunition. They almost dropped us over this hunt that Lanny went on.
Oh, me.
All right.
It was fun, though.
Garrett, Tennessee, what can guys, is there some place guys can go read about, learn about, and be ready to apply next February like us?
They're going to melt the server. Hey, give them a day late right here so we can get in front of them.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I mean, basically, if you just Google elk in Tennessee, the very first thing that'll come up is that TWRA website. And there's a whole page dedicated to elk management in Tennessee. It should outline all the different procedures for applying for the hunt, and you can look at maps and plan your trip.
Yeah, that sounds good. Do you have an Instagram account, or you want to give out your phone number or your?
No, I don't have any Instagram.
All right, we're there. Well, look, we wish y'all a lot of luck. Thank you for letting us tag along and
thank you for putting up Richie.
Learn more about the elk program.
Right.
It's really interesting.
Absolutely, anytime.
All right.
Guys, we're gonna have to apply.
Yes,
it would be a lot of fun.
We're out. I didn't get any elk meat this year. Did you, Bobby?
I did not. Nobody shared.
Nobody
like
shared.
They generally do. All right. Why don't you say goodbye, Dudley?
Goodbye, Dudley.
Get us out of here, Richie.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the Gamekeeper Podcast, and be sure to tune in again. Subscribe to Gamekeeper Farming for Wildlife magazine, and don't miss the Mossy Oak Properties Fistful of Dirt podcast with my good buddy, Ronnie Cuz Strickland.